Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season wins total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our chief medical examiner and senior analyst, Kenneth. Coming up in this episode, we will be examining the Colorado Buffaloes. Colorado finished with a 9-3 record and 7-2 in the Big 12. Head coach Prime in his 2 seasons has really improved this team. Before Dion took over in Boulder, this one may be the worst Division I program. In 2023, the Buffaloes finished 4-8, but took a major step forward in 2024.
And thanks, Tina, for once again setting the stage for where we're going to go with the 2024 Colorado Buffaloes. You heard that Coach Prime has done a fantastic job since taking over in Boulder. Folks, this was arguably 2 years ago the worst Power 5 team at the time in college football. For them to be basically one game out of being in the college football playoffs is nothing short of phenomenal. But we have a lot of work to get to as far as breaking down this team from the 2024 season. So let's go ahead and get underway. And as always, we like to start with the betting analysis. And this team absolutely exceeded those preseason goals. Their win total was set at 5.5. Winning 9 games, they absolutely flew past that. Our guys in the desert really struggled with setting the preseason numbers for this conference especially. That's something that we're going to keep an eye on in 2025. Now, let's talk about where we had this team as far as our in-season data. And as far as our in-season data, we had this team at a composite win total. We have three different metrics that go into giving us that composite number. We had Colorado even better than what they performed. We had them at a 9.5, so fell a little bit short of that goal because one of our metrics absolutely had Colorado as a double-digit win team. So that kind of took up that composite number, but still 9 wins, a phenomenal job there. Let's talk quickly about some other data points here. This team was our 19th overall team in 2024. And believe it or not, they were our 13th power ranked team. And as far as our Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network playoff committee rankings, we had the Buffs at 23. So fantastic job there by Coach Prime. Now, let's talk about the offense because this offense was firepower all over the place. With the Heisman Trophy winner in Travis Hunter, arguably one of the most gifted athletes we've ever seen at the college football level, what he was able to do not only on offense and defense, but it wasn't just Travis Hunter. Quarterback Shedeur Sanders, future first-round pick, had a phenomenal season, folks. 37 passing touchdowns, only 10 INTs. That we like that kind of ratio, almost a 4-to-1 passing touchdown to INT ratio. That is definitely something that's going to get you drafted. But let's talk about the other wide receivers on this team that will be making their way to the NFL level. Jimmy Horn Jr., fantastic job, 37 receptions, 441 yards. Jonte Wester, 74 receptions, 931 yards, 10 receiving touchdowns to also go along with Hunter's 96 receptions, over 1,200 yards, 15 receiving touchdowns. So a lot of star power there in Boulder, won't be there in 2025. Now, as we always like to do, let's start with how good were the defenses that they faced last year. And if you've been with us throughout this series, want to say thank you. And if this is your first one, glad to have you aboard. So basically 68 Power 4 teams when you include the Power 4 conferences and Notre Dame. We like to set that benchmark of 68 to find out how many of those quality teams did you face last year. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see those rankings here as far as their opponents' defensive power rankings. But if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, I'll go through those verbally for you. So let's start with it. Nebraska was ranked 14th. Baylor was 49th. UCF was 61st. Kansas State was 25th. Cincinnati was 31st. Utah was 12th. And Kansas was 41. So out of their 12 opponents, 11 of those being Division I opponents, 7 of them ranked inside of that top 68. So this team actually did square off against some really good defenses. Okay, now let's jump into where this offense was from a raw accounting standpoint, and then when we adjust for opponent, where did they end up at? And before I get to that, let's talk about their strength of schedule. So Colorado's strength of schedule was the 49th best out of 134 Division I teams last year. Now, their strength of record. Now, your strength of record is something that you can control. Who's on your schedule? How those teams perform, that's out of your control. Now, when we look at their strength of record, 102. So their opponents did not perform as well. And when you look at some of the records for their opponents, you're going to see UCF was 4-8. Nebraska was 6-6. Arizona was 4-8. Cincinnati 5-7. Same can be said for Utah and Kansas, and Oklahoma State had a horrendous season going 3-9. So nothing you can do about that if you're Colorado. You can only play who's on your schedule. But as far as their out of conference schedule, not horrendous there whatsoever. Okay, now let's get back to the offense. Colorado's points per game, 34.5. When we adjust for opponent, actually goes up to 35.6. So up one full point there. As far as their passing yards. Now, their passing yards, 327. When we adjust for opponent, that goes down about 25 yards to 301. So still a prolific passing game, just not quite as strong when we adjust for opponent. Now, here's the one that kind of shocked me a little bit. Their rushing yards. This team only averaged 70 yards per game last year, but when we adjust that for opponent, it goes up to about 105 yards per game. So plus 34 on that. Now, their total offense, they finished the season averaging about 398 yards per game. We actually, when we adjust those for opponent, that goes up to about 406. So about an 8-yard improvement when we adjust for opponent. This team was absolutely phenomenal, getting chunk plays, 6.2 yards per play. As far as scoring touchdowns, this team was absolutely prolific. 40% of their drives ended with a touchdown. 49% of their drives ended with either a touchdown or a field goal. That's how you average almost 35 points per game. Now, the big bugaboo with Colorado, and this is something that Coach Prime is going to have to fix, is this team is still giving up way too many sacks. NCAA average is about 24. They give 38 sacks last year, committed 13 turnovers. So good job of not turning the ball over too much, but you got to take less sacks going forward. Now, when I talk about our 3 E's, your offense effectiveness, explosiveness, and efficiency, those 3 categories, very important to us here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. As far as how effective was this offense last year, 59th out of 134 teams. As far as being explosive, 47th. And as far as being efficient, 27th. Now, their overall offensive ranking, they were 46th in the nation for us last year. All right, let's flip it over to the defense because I'm really interested to see how this defense performed last year. Now, how good were the offenses did Colorado's defense face last year? Once again, we're going to set that benchmark at number 68. So when we take a look at the quality of defenses that they faced, we're going to see, quality of offenses that their defense faced. See, Nebraska was 67th, so right there on that cut line. Baylor was 7th. Okay, Central Florida was 24th. Kansas State was 29th. Cincinnati was 42nd. Texas Tech was 9th. Kansas was 23rd. And Oklahoma State was 57th. So 8 of their opponents were inside of that top 68. Now, let's take a look at the breakdown for this unit as far as their statistical breakdown. So this team was allowing about 22 points per game. When we adjust that for opponent, it actually goes down to 17. So almost a 5-point improvement per game. Their passing yards, they allow 205 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, almost a full half of a football field difference as far as an improvement goes from about 205 down to 156 there. Now, their rushing yardage, they allowed 149. When we adjust for opponent, it goes down slightly to 141, so an 8-yard improvement. Total offense allowed to their opponents. The raw numbers say about 354. When we adjust for opponent, actually 297. So this defense actually performed a lot better when we adjust for opponent, almost a 56-yard improvement. Now, scoring drives. Their opponents scored on about, let's call it 30% of their drives. And as far as finding the end zone, their opponents were finding the end zone, let's call it 21% of the time. So Not a bad job there on defense. This team actually got to the quarterback quite a bit as well. Now, they did generate 35 sacks, so good job there by the defense. Let's talk about the three E's once again. How efficient was this defense? Defense was 11th as far as being allowing opponents explosive plays, 17th. And as far as being efficient on defense, also 17th. So coming in with an overall defense ranking of 14th, a lot better than what I was expecting when I first put this together. So something to definitely keep in mind there. Let's give some key takeaways here. When I go back and look at their offense, high octane passing and efficient running. When I take a look at their defense, strong unit, but did wear down at times. Now, let's take a look at the coaching and situational play. In one-score games, Colorado was 2-1. Against quality opponents, they were 4-3. Did have a plus 11 turnover differential. That's in the top 10 of the FBS last year. Now, penalties, discipline was an issue. This team had about 8 penalties per game, about 73 penalty yards per game. Something that you got to clean up there. Colorado, not aggressive, Coach Prime, as far as going for it on fourth downs. One of the more conservative coaches when it comes to that metric. Out of 144 qualifying coaches last year, he was 81st there. And when you look at their fourth down rate of 42%, may have gone for it just a little bit more. Now, special teams was above average, but not elite. Converted 11 out of 14 field goal attempts. That's about 70, let's call it 79%. Punting was solid. Average yard per punt of 43.8. Special teams, as I said, solid, but not a huge difference maker. Now, what went wrong for Colorado in 2024? Inefficient running game. This team was one-dimensional on offense, making them predictable at times. Penalty problems. Colorado ranked amongst some of the worst teams as far as penalties per game. And we talked about it, struggling on fourth down, both offensively and defensively. Fourth down conversions definitely hurt this team quite a bit. Now, let's get to how did this team look when they won? And give me just a moment to reset the headset here. Okay, so when this team won games last year, want to take a look at how did they do from an offensive and defensive standpoint. So as I mentioned, won 9 games last year. When they won, this offense was being very prolific, as I talked about. So 9 wins last year, averaging 39.4 points per game. Looks like they were throwing the ball about 39 times per game, about 336 yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, 11.8 yards per completion. Now, here's where it definitely gets interesting. When this team was winning games last year, they were running the ball about 30 times per game for about 91 yards per game. Three-point yards per carry, about 427 yards of total offense, 6.2 yards per play. Now, the run pass ratio was about 56.5 pass to about 43.4% run. Now, in the 3 games that they lost, I want you to hear these numbers, folks, because they're eye-popping. They only averaged 19.7 points per game. Threw the ball about 36 times, so the attempts really didn't change a lot, but the yardage difference was noticeable. Down from 336 to 299, 8.2 yards per attempt, 11.2 yards per completion. Now, 18 rushing attempts per game, only 9.7 yards per game. Folks, you heard that right. Not even averaging 10 yards per game when they lost. That is putrid. Now, one of those games they had a minus 29 yards. So remember that 5.7 yards per play. Now, as far as the difference when this team won versus when they lost. So when they won, they were averaging about 20 more points per game, about 37 more yards passing per game. And definitely the biggest note is almost 81 yards rushing per game more on about 12 more attempts and about 2.5 more yards per rushing attempt. So that is something to keep in mind. Also want to give you this. In their 9 wins, they only committed 10 turnovers. In their 3 losses, they committed 3 turnovers. So big difference there in that number. Now, let's take a look at the defense here. And from a defensive standpoint, when this team won last year, they were playing really, really solid defense there. Averaging about, their opponents were averaging about 18.8 points per game on, let's see, opponents 30, let's call it 33 attempts, passing attempts for 205 yards, 6.3 yards per attempt, 11.2 yards per completion. Their opponents were running the ball about 37 times for only 125 yards, 3.5 yards per carry. And as far as this defense, when they won, they were forcing turnovers, 23 forced turnovers in their 9 wins. In their 3 losses, their opponents were averaging 32 points per game. Passing attempts went down from 32, let's call it 33, to about 26. Opponents were still throwing for 204 yards, so their yards per attempt rose about almost 2 yards to 7.9. Yards completion stayed the same at 11.3. Biggest difference here. Their opponents running the ball 45 times for 222 yards, 4.9 yards per carry. And here's the biggest outlier. In the 3 games that they lost, they forced 1 turnover. So the difference between when they lost and when they won, their opponents were scoring about 13 points less. Yards per game as far as passing, not noticeable, but their opponents, when they lost, were running the ball almost 97 more yards per game. So we know the biggest issues with this team as far as that outcome. Now it's time to get to the final verdict. And the Colorado Buffaloes will get a B+ as far as their grade for us for the 2024 season. The reason for that, Colorado had a high-powered team that exceeded expectations, but their reliance on their passing game, lack of discipline, and issues in key situations prevented them from reaching an even higher ceiling. So what does this team need to do in 2025? We're going to start right there. They got to develop a competent running game. That's object number 1. Object number 2, they got to reduce the penalties and improve the discipline. Coach Prime, you played for a very disciplined defensive coordinator, not so much head coach in college. You need to kind of emulate some of the things that Mickey Andrews, I know, taught you there at Florida State. Key number 3, they must improve execution there on 4th downs. If Colorado can improve in these 3 areas, I do believe that Colorado can contend for the Big 12 championship here in 2025. Now, let's talk about some of the final takeaways from Colorado. We know that they're replacing a lot of firepower. You're talking about your starting quarterback for the last 2 years, 3 high-powered wide receivers are now off this roster. Now, what you bring in 2025, both from the transfer portal and from the high school recruiting, you're set up fairly well at the quarterback position. Now you got to make sure that you surround either one of those quarterbacks with a better offensive line play, and then kind of taking some of the pressure off of that defense. I think that defense started to wear down towards the end of the season where we saw Colorado lose 2 of their last 3 games against a Kansas team where they were absolutely beat up both physically and mentally in that ball game, losing that game 37-21, and then ending um a game that we didn't count, but their bowl game, they were thoroughly beaten by Colorado. I'm sorry, beaten by BYU 36-14. So we like what we saw from Colorado. Still, I think that there's still much more that this team can give us in 2025.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy Report.